Welcome to Top of Mind, the show where we talk to real estate industry insiders and experts about the biggest trends impacting the market today. Enjoy the show.
Mike Simonson here. Thanks for joining me today. Welcome to the Top of Mind podcast. This is where I talk to the smartest leaders, thinkers, and doers in the real estate industry. For a couple of years now, we've been sharing our latest market data every week in our weekly video series. With the new Top of Mind podcast, we're looking to add some context to the discussion about what's happening in the market from the leaders in the industry. Each week, Altos Research tracks every home for sale in the country. All the pricing, supply and demand, we analyze all that data and we make it available to you before you see it in the traditional channels. People desperately need to know what's happening in the housing market right now. It's been so hot, so competitive, and suddenly maybe the landscape's changing. So, when people ask me, Mike, can I get the data from my local market? The answer is yes. Visit altosresearch.com for free consultation on how you can use market data in your business with your buyers and sellers right now. So without further ado, let me introduce my guest today. I'm thrilled to have Austin Allison. Austin co-founded Pacaso to make the dream of second home ownership a reality for more people. Pacaso is Austin's second startup. In 2009, he founded dotloop, a company that created software to seamlessly manage real estate transactions. Zillow acquired dotloop in 2015, and Austin continued to run dotloop as a Zillow executive until 2018. Austin started selling real estate at the age of 18 and worked in residential and commercial real estate for a decade. And I remember some of the very early dotloop conversations we had, Austin, a long time ago, 14, 15 years ago. So welcome. I'm glad to have you on the Top of Mind podcast.
Thank you so much, Mike. It's really great to be here and good to see you again.
Nice to see you. Okay, so for the listeners who don't know Pacaso Homes, why don't you give them the quick overview?
Yeah, absolutely. So Pacaso provides a service that enables people to own a second home for 1/8 the cost, and we do that through this category that we're kind of pioneering, that we describe as co-ownership, which basically means that a small group of people can co-own a home together, except for Pacaso manages the entire experience. So the easiest way to get your mind around it, Mike, is imagine if you and 3 or 4 of your best friends or family members decided that you wanted to own a home somewhere. You could go do this on your own. You could form your own LLC. You could find the home. You could buy it, hire a property manager. That's essentially how Pacaso works, except for we sort of handle all the details from start to finish. So it just makes the co-ownership experience easier and more seamless for all the parties involved. And the reason why we created the company is to make second home ownership accessible for more people. I grew up in a small town north of Cincinnati, Ohio. My dad was a carpenter and we lived paycheck to paycheck. And I mention that because I was like most families who didn't have a second home. I just dreamed of owning a second home. And along the way, when my wife Angela and I were able to become second homeowners, it just totally, enriched our lives. That privilege of being able to own a home in and of itself is a massive opportunity and a gift. But to be able to own a second home is it's life-changing. And I wanted to find a way to make that possible for more people.
That's great. I totally get it. And I've seen, so you said 1/8, so you're going in with 8 people on a home?
Yeah, so you can buy a minimum of 1/8, but many people will buy more than that, right? It depends on how often you plan to use your second home. Now, the reason why we start with 1/8 is that's about how much the typical second homeowner uses their home. So independent of co-ownership, if you were to just survey whole second homeowners, what you'll find is that the average second home is used about 5 or 6 weeks per year, which is about 1/8 of the time. So that's our sort of entry point. But if you plan to or have the means and ability to use the second home more than that, you can buy more. I just talked to one of our clients a couple weeks ago. I was looking at our sales reports, and I noticed that the same person bought 4 different Picassos in 4 different locations, all in the same week. And I'm like, wow, we don't see that. We do see people buy multiple units fairly often, but it's rare to see somebody buy 4 separate units in 4 homes in the same week. So I picked up the phone and I called this individual, and he's a family in Chicago, and him and his family wanted to get out of the Chicago winters where it gets cold and windy. But they couldn't, justify owning a home that they would only use, less than half the time. So they used Pacaso to be able to own a couple of different homes and really live that second home life, be part of a second community, meet a second group of friends, but without the overhead and expense and hassle associated with whole home ownership. It's hard. Unless you're going to use a home more than 6 months a year, it's really hard to justify owning all of it. And it's also wasteful. Every home that's sitting empty is bad for the environment. It's bad for the community. It drives up home prices because it further constrains supply. So we're just focused on helping people make better use of homes and in a more sustainable way. And it has the effect of making it accessible to more people.
That's really cool. And I'm very interested in the efficiency part of that discussion. So you said that the typical second home is 6 weeks a year, is used 6 weeks a year, 5 to 6 weeks a year. Have you observed, so part of that is that it's Christmas, it's spring break week, that some of those 4th of July week are the big weeks. Have you observed that with Pacaso, the homes are used 90% of the year or something like that? Can you actually measure utilization density going up?
Yeah, absolutely. And just to clarify one thing, for some people, 4th of July and Christmas or New Year's, are the big dates, but not for everyone. I use my wife and I as an example. The 2 biggest weeks in Lake Tahoe are 4th of July and New Year's. I mean, there are no homes or hotels available on those 2 weeks. It's fully occupied every single year. But my wife and I have never been to Lake Tahoe. We've owned there since 2013, and we've never been to Lake Tahoe on Christmas or 4th of July that I can remember. Nor do we intend to go there on those holidays. That's just not our thing. We prefer to be there in the shoulder season, right, where there's less traffic, shorter lines. We can get into restaurants without having reservations and stuff like that. So everybody travels a little bit differently. And the more diverse the group of owners is in a particular home, the less travel conflict you have right out of the gate. You end up getting some people that like the winter, some people that like the summer, some people that like the shoulder season, some people that like the peak. Some people don't celebrate, Christmas. Other people do. So the more diversity you have in the ownership group, the less conflict there is right out of the gate. But to answer the other part of your question around utilization, our homes are highly utilized. Once a home gets put into service, meaning once it's fully sold, they're utilized just under 90% of the time, which is incredible. I mean, that's 6 to 7 times as much as a normal second home. And it really occupies like a primary home where the owners are using the home year round. And there's a couple reasons why that's important. One is the accessibility that we talked about before. Like when you're only buying an eighth or a quarter of the home, it lowers the price of entry and also the operating cost. But the other big benefit is that, one of the big problems for second home destinations is that during the shoulder season, the local economy really struggles. The local bars, coffee shops, markets, the ski resorts, the bicycle shops, whatever the case may be, those businesses really struggle during the shoulder season when people aren't there to support the businesses year round. Pacaso owners support businesses year round, right? And that is a really, really important piece because when you're supporting the local coffee shop, that local coffee shop can employ a barista, and that barista can spend money at other businesses or hire babysitters. And that's really what makes the economic cycle turn in an economy, in a local economy. And having homes utilized by owners is one of the best things that you can do to keep a local economy healthy. the other reason why it's really important, Mike, is, you know about housing data, as good or better than anyone in our industry. So you know very well that, we're in the middle of a housing crisis in most markets right now, an affordability crisis where home prices have appreciated at a level and continue to appreciate at levels that are unsustainable. So if you're a primary, like a local worker that is trying to buy a primary home in one of these markets, it's almost impossible to be able to afford a home. And one of the reasons why it's so difficult to afford a home is you have second home cash buyers coming into these towns, buying median price homes, taking away more supply from the local workforce, driving up houses even further. Pacaso has the effect of actually alleviating that pressure, because we're empowering people who would have bought a $500,000 or $600,000 home to buy a $4 or $5 million home with Pacaso. So we're actually redirecting demand away from the median tier into the luxury tier, alleviating pressure on that median price tier, which is really good for everyone. So long-winded way of saying, yes, these homes occupy like primary homes, not like typical secondary homes. And that's good for everybody. It's good for the environment. It's good for the community, and it's good for housing affordability.
So lots to unpack there. Let's start with the fact that your kid's only a year or two old. You've got in a few years, you're gonna have about a 15-year window when your only vacation time are peak days.
Yeah.
Then you're gonna switch into that mode.
That's true.
And then, but you and the dog and the kid are gonna go. You're like, well, we can get out for this spring break week. Let's go. So I love the argument. Where you have 8 buyers who are going to buy in Tahoe or they were going to buy their houses in Napa, and now they can buy one house and leave the more common space open.
Right.
Tell me about how when people are buying a home together, there's all kinds of nuances to that. Do I come with my 7 friends, or and how do we get to that diversity? How does that typically work?
So you absolutely can come with your 7 friends or fewer if you all want to own more than an 8th. Absolutely, we'd help you with that. But most of the time it doesn't work that way. Most of the time you might have 1 or 2 owners, or maybe 2 or 3. I guess you can't have 1 owner that knows him or herself, but it's not uncommon to see 2 or 3 owners that know each other in a home. But oftentimes there's people who are meeting through Pacaso, right? Where Pacaso is part of the service that we're providing is enabling people to connect, right? We're sort of aggregating demand, I guess, is one way to think about it, by making this service available. So you don't have to self-organize and know the other owners to get onto the platform. And the service that we're providing is encompassing of really all aspects of managing and operating the home. Everything from designing the property to repairing things when they break, to even paying bills on behalf of owners. So that as an owner, you just get to show up at your home, enjoy the home, and when you leave, you don't have to worry about all the other hassles and headaches that are customary of home ownership.
Yeah,
so,
the water heater's going out or whatever.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So we pretty much handle everything soup to nuts. What I forgot, what was the other part of your question? I lost my train of thought.
So I'm thinking about so now we bought, and we've got things about I'm interested in the liquidity. So how do you buy? How do you sell? Is that how's that end up working out?
Yeah. So, I mean, it pretty much transacts just like a normal, home. I mean, there's only one difference, which is that the other owners have a right of first refusal for when you go to sell. But Pacaso is effectively like a property manager that's facilitating this experience. And we try to work with real estate agents on every transaction that we can. Sometimes buyers will come unrepresented by agents, but oftentimes they come represented by agents, and we pay full commissions. Even in markets where the standard co-op commission is only 2 or 2.5%, we always pay a full 3%. And we make the process very easy for our real estate agent partners. We try to make it as easy as a referral. So any extra, questions or work related to the co-ownership model, we handle that on behalf of our agent partners. So we make it really easy, and it transacts just like a normal home. So as an owner of a Picasso, let's say you bought your Picasso for $500,000, and then a year from now you decide you want to sell. You just pick your price. I mean, we'll provide guidance on what we think it's worth, but ultimately, just like a normal home listing, you pick your price, and if there's support for that price in the market, you can sell. But ultimately, if there's not support for that price in the market, then you'll have to adjust your price. But so far, any of the resales that have happened through Picasso have resold in less than 10 days for greater than 15% more than what they paid a year prior. So it pretty much tracks the underlying real estate. And again, the only difference is that the other owners in the ownership group have a right to buy the unit before it goes to the open market.
And so then I just list it with a realtor, like I would list my house. I'd list my 1/8 share.
Oh, you list it with Picasso. Yeah, exactly.
And but I'm listing my 1/8 share on Picasso, my Picasso share on Picasso.
Yep. And then we participate in the MLS just like everybody else. So the units get syndicated to all the other, real estate websites, into the portals and all that good stuff.
Yeah, cool. Do you I lost my question. On so we're selling them, we're listing them on Picasso. Man, I had the next follow-up I was thinking about. Okay, well, let's talk about let's talk about you mentioned like $5 million homes.
Yeah.
Like $4 or $5 million homes. Is that what you're buying? Oh, I know what the question was. The question was, is Picasso ever taking capital risk? Is Picasso ever buying a chunk of these homes? Because we've got 3 buyers, but we don't have the other 5 yet.
Yeah, that's an important part of the service that we're providing. Like if you and 2 of your friends wanted to do this on your own and find some other buyers, like there's a lot of things that need to come together, to sort of make the process seamless. So, one of those things is securing the property and furnishing it and designing it and all that stuff. And we handle all that, and we do buy the property. Now, generally, the property will be pre-sold to some level before we end up closing. And then we hold a portion of the property for a period of time as we're selling through the remaining interest. And then once the property is fully sold through, we retain no ownership. You and your small group of owners, you could have as little as 2 owners in a home in scenarios where 2 people buy 50%, or as many as 8 owners in a home. Typically we'll see 5 or 6, because a couple of people will buy a quarter. But once the home is fully syndicated, the owners own 100% of the property, and Picasso is just a property manager.
Neat. And so, okay, so now let's shift into the $4 or $5 million. Is that the price range that you're doing? I suppose for second homes, if I was going to be buying a $500,000 second home in a beach town in Florida or someplace, then I'm buying 1/8 of a bigger house, I'm buying $4 million. Is that how you guys think about it?
Yeah, our sweet spot today is $4 to $5 million for the whole home price, for sure. Call it $4 to $6 million, I would say. But it varies by market. So the way to think about it is the multiple on median price. So we're typically 2 to 4 times the median price in a market. We're not buying median price homes. We're not competing with the local school teacher, for homes. We're always buying luxury homes, but the price point aligns with the market. Like where I'm at right now, I'm in Scottsdale. I don't know what the median is here, but I'm guessing the median's, probably $500,000 or $600,000. So in Scottsdale, our price point might be, assuming the median is $500,000 or $600,000, our range would be, call it 1.2 to, 3 or 4 million at the high end. Whereas other markets like
The median price in Scottsdale is 1.6 million.
Is it really?
Yep, right now.
Wow. Oh, okay. I didn't realize prices had gone up that much in Scottsdale. Wow. Well, I'm glad I'm talking to a real estate expert. Really? 1.6? No,
Yeah.
that can't be. Across all
Yeah.
of Scottsdale?
Yep.
Wow, that's insane.
You know,
That's a big number.
it's a big number, and you know, there's a lot fewer on the market than there usually
What
is,
about
although
Phoenix?
it's starting to
What's
climb.
the median in Phoenix?
In Phoenix,
Yeah.
let's look.
Maybe that's why I was thinking. I think about Scottsdale and Phoenix as one market.
That's similar. They're very different, right? But so Scottsdale or Phoenix is 540.
Yeah, that's what I would have guessed. Okay. So anyway, in a market like Phoenix, our range would be, 1 point something to maybe 3 million. But in a market like Scottsdale, right, where the median's 1.5, we're going to be $3 million and above.
Yeah.
Like the first house we brought on in Scottsdale was $4 million as an example. So it's always a multiple of the median price in the market, and it's always luxury, in that market.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. Okay. So always luxury. So it is luxury second homes, but like being more accessible.
Yeah. Yeah. And the reason, there's a few reasons why we care so much about the luxury price point. One is we just care a lot about, society. We care a lot about community. We care a lot about housing affordability. And, it wouldn't be, I don't think it would be good for the world if we were competing, with school teachers for median price homes. That would contribute to housing, the housing affordability crisis in a negative way, in my opinion. But when you can redirect demand, this luxury demand, into a different tier, I'm a little less worried about driving up the price of $4 million homes. You know what I mean? Like if you have the means to buy a $4 million home, like if prices are appreciated at that level, like, sorry about your luck. I'm much more concerned about protecting the median price tier to ensure that people who need primary homes have a shot, at getting their primary home, as opposed to what's happening today, where they're competing with all these second home cash buyers. But the second reason why, our business model is focused on the luxury tier is because one of the benefits of co-owning a home is that it supercharges your buying power. The family that could have only afforded a $500,000 home before can now afford a $4 million home. And if given the choice, if you go into a market like Scottsdale, where the median is 1.5, what you're going to get for $500,000 is very different than what you get for 4 million, right? So if given those two choices, most people would pick the $4 million home. So it sort of naturally elevates the price point that people can participate in. It's kind of like, one analog that people often use when they're talking about Pacaso is carpooling. If you think about what housing affordability problems are and relate that to traffic, and you think about carpooling and relate that to co-ownership, would you rather have 8 empty SUVs, gas guzzling SUVs driving down the highway, or one fuel efficient SUV holding 8 people? Of course, you'd rather the fuel efficient SUV. It'd be lower cost for everybody. You'd have less pollution, less traffic. And by sharing the cost of the vehicle, you might be able to afford a $200,000 SUV as opposed to a $50,000 SUV, right? When you're sharing the cost. So it's just a more efficient model for everybody, for the owners, but also for, housing at large, because we're making better use of stock that would have otherwise, housing stock that would have otherwise been sitting vacant for 10 months per year, because that's the norm for second home owners.
Yeah, that's really terrific. Let's shift gears. Let's talk about the future. Let's talk about what you see in the future, both in the market that Pacaso is focusing on now, but also bigger picture, like you've been in the core of the real estate technology world for a long time. So tell me what you see is happening, things that, like, trends that consumers might care about, or shifts in the market? Tell me what you see in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the biggest shift that we're seeing, and it might be the biggest shift because this is closest to our business. So it's something we think about and see and experience every single day. But the biggest shift is definitely the work from home shift. I mean, there are millions and millions and millions of additional families now that have more flexibility to work from home, either part-time or full-time. And that flexibility has empowered people to rethink how and where they live and work. And more people are migrating to new locations that previously weren't practical. You know, second home markets are one of the most obvious places where people are migrating. Like if you were stuck in a city, a cold, windy city, a gloomy city before, and now you have the opportunity to work from anywhere, and you've always dreamed about, you know, living by the water or living by the mountains or living in the desert, you know, where the weather is warmer, or even living in a different state where maybe taxes are more favorable or whatever the case might be. You now have that flexibility. So people are moving around. And what that moving around is doing is it's really creating a lot of imbalances between supply and demand. Like in second home markets where this is most pronounced, you have this permanent shift in new demand. People that are going to these places that previously weren't really practical as primary home locations, and just not enough supply. And there's really no way for supply that I can see to catch up with demand in these locations. New construction's too expensive. The labor shortage is real. The cost of materials is going up. Zoning is very restrictive. Land is locked and restricted in many of these places. So it's hard to see a scenario where we're going to be able to build our way out of this problem that we're faced in many of these markets. So I think that one of the biggest sort of movements that needs to continue to play out to mitigate some of these problems are making better use of existing resources. So obviously we've already talked about co-ownership as one in the second home space. All these empty homes, you know, some of these markets have 50% of their homes occupied by second homeowners, right? So you're talking about 50% of homes in some of these markets are sitting vacant for most of the year. That is a shame. You know, that is a waste. And that's contributing to the problem. So that's one thing that we can do is make better use of empty homes. Another thing that we can do is make better use of empty yards. So like in California, the accessory dwelling unit is often referred to as an ADU, is a pretty innovative movement that's been happening for a while that I think is really starting to take off. Like the state of California just passed, within the last year, they passed a new rule, or I get maybe it was the last 2 years, I can't remember exactly, a new rule that made it essentially required, you know, that municipalities support the development of ADUs in certain types of properties, which means that people can now take vacant yards, put units on those vacant yards and turn them into rentals, which creates more affordable housing stock for, you know, local workers, which I think is great. California also did something, and I'm just using California as an example because that's the state I'm most familiar with. Other states are doing similar things, but California also just passed this law that's pretty controversial in certain communities called SB 9, which enables previously, and I'm just sort of, I may not be completely accurate in the way that I'm describing this, but basically the gist of how I understand it is it takes a single family, you know, parcel, and enables it to be used as a multifamily parcel, right? So you can get more density out of the same resources that we had in the past. And if you just zoom out and look back over the last couple hundred years at how we evolve as a society, you know, as things get more dense and populated, it's important that we make better use of resources. So like a couple hundred years ago, if you were to look at many of these towns that are now inhabited by lots of people, they were just farms. You know, they were just empty farms. And then over time, as density and population rolls into a particular area, as demand grows, farms turn into subdivisions. Eventually, enough density grows, you know, and we start to be landlocked and we build up. And that's how cities are formed. So we're in a place now in a lot of these markets where we're just like constrained and there's more demand than supply. And we have to figure out how to deal with that in a more sustainable way. And the most obvious way in my mind is to make better use of underutilized, assets. So that's definitely the biggest movement that we're seeing that we think is, just getting started and here to stay. There's a bunch of other really innovative things that are happening in the real estate world that are kind of outside of, my realm, but that I'm excited about. Modular construction and prefab, sustainable, construction methodologies, I think are very interesting. And there's a lot of cool companies that I've heard about recently that are doing stuff in that space. I think anything around like virtual touring, virtual staging, different types of photography innovations that make it easier for people to buy and experience homes and locations remotely. I think that's super interesting and still ripe for lots of innovation and improvement, even though we've come a long way.
Are you guys using some of those the innovations at Picasso?
Yeah, I mean, like we use Matterport, which has been around for a while now, and we do some virtual staging stuff, but we're not doing nearly enough. I mean, I think a lot of people are buying Picassos now without visiting the home in person. But not nearly as many as I would expect, like with all the technology that's available today, I'm surprised that 50% of our owners aren't buying sight unseen. It's like there's so much technology out there that you can really create an experience online that enables you to get a feel for definitely the home, but also the neighborhood and, what it's like to be in that home. But I think everybody's still just in the early stages of trying to get this experience right and take advantage of all the technologies that are available to get it right. Because we're not there yet. A lot of people,
that's really interesting. So only a small chunk of your buyers are buying just from the website.
Yeah. I don't know what I haven't really tracked the percentage, but it's pretty small. I'd say it's like 20% or less, but it should be 50%.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
And let's see, what are the things that I might be interested in order to help me make that decision? Some of it is the being in the space. And I know when I bought my second home, I bought my house in Tahoe. I looked at 25 homes before I bought that place. And I wanted to see the right one. I wanted to see, that is the driveway too steep? Because if it's too steep, I'm not, you can't get in the winter, or like those kind of things. So some of those things are really hard to capture, even if your Matterport 3D tour is very nice.
Yep. I don't think they should be so hard to capture, though. I mean, the technology exists, right? Like, even something as simple as a FaceTime with your real estate agent. I know that's kind of, old school by today's standards, but if I'm on and I do that, we do this often where, one of our real estate agent partners will be touring a property that we're looking at or that our clients are looking at. And you could get a great feel for pretty much everything that you would want to know. From, how close the neighbors are to what the slope of the driveway is to the traffic on the street. Like you can capture a lot of that from a simple FaceTime. So just to use that as an example, I think there's a lot more that we could do to create amazing online experiences for people.
For sure. That's cool. There's some neat innovation to happen there still. And it's fascinating. I look and I look at a bunch of photos. If I'm shopping, I look at some photos. I like to see it. I look at the map. I like to see where it is on the map. There's you kind of know the neighborhood, but you don't really know. Like there's some interesting stuff to happen there.
And I think when you're buying a whole home, Mike, it's a little different because like that's a big clunky transaction. It's hard to, like, when you buy a home and then resell a home. You're talking months and months and months and lots of stress and headaches. So you really want to get that one right for sure. But one of the things that we've done at Picasso is we eliminate all those headaches. So, let's say you knew you wanted to own a home in Southern California, a second home, but you couldn't justify owning it because it would be your third home now, since you have one in Tahoe. You could buy a Picasso sight unseen in wherever, San Diego, Orange County, whatever. And then once you get there for your first stay, if for whatever reason, like something wasn't quite right, or you found another home that you liked better, we'll allow you to move into that other home, no questions asked, same day. You could sell your Picasso, quote unquote, sell your Picasso and move into another one, same day, no questions asked.
Interesting. Like if I bought it sight unseen, and then I get there and I go, oops.
Yep.
I go, I like that one better.
Yep. 100% transfer guarantee.
Wow.
Yep. Let's say, and let's say you bought one for 300 and then you decide you want to upgrade to one for 500. We just apply the 300 to your 500. Or if you bought one for 500 and then you later decide you wanted to buy one for 400, we'll refund your $100,000 difference. No questions asked, same day. So we've just eliminated, the hassle of buying, right? And then you start to think about how that's going to, really open up possibilities beyond borders. Like, what if you wanted to own a home in Mexico? It's really hard to buy a home as an American in Mexico or Europe or wherever, or it was really hard. Now it's not. That same seamless benefit. I mean, you could buy a home in Mexico with us in, 30 minutes. And we've already done all the research, all the diligence. We have all the financing integrated. You'd be pre-approved, same day. It's a very easy and seamless process. And in this environment where inventory is super constrained, like the luxury of being able to go look at 25 homes now before picking the one that you want, those days are gone. And they're probably gone for forever, in second home markets, because there's so much more demand than supply. Even as things are cooling down right now, I just don't see a scenario where, second home markets correct at a level whereby we start to have a radical abundance of supply again. There's
Really, you don't see it?
No, I don't. I mean, I think there's too much demand that has shifted, right? There's too many people that have flexibility now. I'm not saying things won't cool off. They will, they already are, right? And as rates go up, it's likely to continue to cool off. But what I'm saying is I don't see a scenario where supply outpaces demand in second home markets.
That's really interesting. I love that view of the future. I like to capture the startling ones. That's great. So, and that's basically because we're not building very much supply. We have a big chunk of millennials coming. We do have some boomers ready to retire and sell. Have you looked at your demographics, like age demographics of your Picasso buyers?
Yeah, it's pretty vast. I mean, I would say the brackets are 35 in the low end to 70 something on the high end. But I would say the sweet spot is like early 40s to mid 60s. That's typically what we see. And the common denominators are, family is a big one. A lot of people have kids, either kids that are still in the house or kids that are out of the house. And the reason why that's such a prominent, attribute is because one of the main benefits of a second home is to be able to spend time with your family, right? So a lot of people like to enjoy the second home with their family. So that's a common denominator. Most of our buyers are, nearby their primary home location, like within a few hundred miles.
That's interesting.
Fly. Yes. Some people do fly, and there's some markets that obviously you have to fly, like Hawaii, but like Tahoe is very much a drive market. Most of the people that are buying in Tahoe are from San Francisco.
Yeah.
So you see a lot of those characteristics in many of these markets. But then you have other markets, like Scottsdale's a market where people come from all over, California, Canada, Texas, like the Midwest. There's a really diverse group of feeder markets for a place like this. And I'm not entirely sure what drives that, but it's pretty easy to figure out once you get into a market. I mean, just go talk to 5 real estate agents and ask the question. And, by the end of those 5 conversations, you'll have a pretty good feel for where people come from.
Yeah, that's neat. Do you guys ever do city like condos?
Yeah. So we actually have some condos in Miami right now. We just did a vertical unit in London, in Mayfair, the Mayfair area, which is really cool. And we're planning to do more of it for sure.
Nice. Does it get hard in places like New York that have crazy real estate laws?
Yeah, some markets are definitely more complex than others. New York's one of them for sure.
Yeah. New York has its own orbit, real
Yeah,
estate wise.
New York is in a stratosphere of its own.
Awesome. So, okay, so we talked about the future. What do you think about the technology? We talked a little bit about the consumer showing technology. You have any experience? Let's talk actually about this. Let me ask you about growing a company. It's your second time around. You built Dotloop. You've got some great partners and investors with Pacaso now. You're growing fast. What can you share? Got some lessons? Just how you doing things differently this time around?
Yeah, I've got many lessons. I would say that fortunately, most of the things I wouldn't say that we're necessarily doing differently. We're just a bit better at it because we have more experience and history under our belt. So the most important one is people. There really aren't, in my experience, there really are no shortcuts or silver bullets in business, meaning it's like hard work, it's a struggle, there's highs, there's lows. But if there is a shortcut, it would be hiring great people. And hiring great people is something that, any great leader or great entrepreneur will talk about, but it's a difficult thing to fully appreciate how important that is until you've lived through it, until you've been part of a company that had a lot of people and you felt what the magic was like. When you've got a bunch of super smart people who are all really passionate about the same mission and a culture that empowers people to perform at their best and do their best work. If you can create that sort of environment, you can do anything, like the sky is the limit in terms of potential when you have that setup. And I would say that we were able to create that sort of environment very quickly at Pacaso because many of the people, we've worked with for a long time. Most of the people on our, a lot of the people on our management team are people that I've known or worked with for almost 15 years in some cases, and almost 10 years in all cases. And the same is true of many of the people throughout our org. And even the people who, we didn't work with directly in prior companies, many of them are just one or in some cases 2 degrees separated. So there's a lot of history amongst this team, and it enables and we're all super passionate about the mission. We all wake up every day focused on enriching people's lives through second home ownership and making the world a better place through this new model. And that's kind of the best lesson and shortcut that I can offer. There's a few other, tactical things that I would say that have definitely been a bit more refined with Pacaso than they were in my first company. One is finding product market fit. It took us years to find product market fit at Dotloop. And by product market fit, I mean, you've got, a product that just really delivers great value for the customer, and it's obvious to the customer and they're willing to pay for it. And it doesn't feel like you're pushing rope up a hill. It feels more like there's pull on the demand side. And, we have more product market fit at Pacaso than I could have ever imagined at this stage.
It sure seems like you've got some really big momentum. Yeah. How big's the team now?
A lot of that's, some of that's luck, by the way. A lot of it's hard work and assembling the right team, but I think the timing has been really good too. There's never been a better time to be in the second home co-ownership business.
Holy moly. Yeah. Because you launched Pacaso 2018?
No, 2020.
2020.
Yeah. So
wow.
Yeah, we Spencer and I started working on it in 2019 during my year off, but we didn't officially form the company until early 2020. Started hiring people, on the team in the first quarter, and then we launched. We operated under a stealth brand while we were trying to figure it out and optimize product market fit. But we were ready to launch Pacaso.com in October of 2020. So we're a year and a half following Pacaso's launch.
Wow, man, that's fast.
been a
And
rock.
yes, wow, what an amazing time to launch into that space.
And
it'll
to
be
answer your question, we're 300 people. We're about 300 people, and we're fully remote. And we were fully distributed by default before the pandemic. It wasn't a byproduct. We started fully remote. That was our intention, and it's been amazing. Our 300 people are spread across 35 states, 6 or 7 countries now, and we have no headquarter office location. Everything is done remotely, which is super cool.
That's cool, and it's really fascinating to design the company from the start that way.
Yeah, big advantage. I think it would be much harder. I mean, I have a ton of respect and admiration for all the companies now that are making that transition, to either remote or hybrid. And I think that's where it has to go. It's hard for me to see a scenario where like we go back to the same level of, inflexibility, in the sense that you got to be in the office 5 or 6 days a week. Like those days are just gone for most industries.
Yeah.
Not all, but most. And I think it's much easier to start that way as opposed to making the transition.
Yeah. Do you find you have Pacaso employees working from the Pacaso they own in some,
Yeah. I mean, I am right now. I'm working from my Pacaso right now, and it's pretty common, and not just Pacaso crew members, but all of our owners. I mean, many of our owners are working remote. Like people aren't vacationing at their Pacaso. It's not like when you, I mean, you're a second homeowner. When you go to your second home, are you on vacation? Do you tell people that you're on vacation? No.
Nope.
Right. You're just at your home. You've got a different group of friends. You've got your restaurants you support, your trails that you mountain bike on. Like you're part of that community.
Yeah.
You have a second life, and that's how our owners are too. They're not vacationing at their homes. They're simply living at their second home. They just happen to be living at their second home for, less than all of the year, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks, depending on the situation. But they're not vacationers. They're living at their home. And most of the time, most people work. So oftentimes they're working from their Pacaso for sure.
Amazing. Well, let's wrap it up here. Pacaso, Pacaso.
Nailed it.
At Pacaso.com. Where should they find you? Where should our listeners find and follow you?
You can find me on Twitter. So G Austin Allison is my handle. My first name's actually Gregory, so that's where the G comes from. G Austin Allison. And that's pretty much.
That's a great place to connect.
Yeah,
excellent.
Pretty much where I hang out online.
Excellent. All right. Well, Austin, thank you so much for your time today. It was a great conversation. Really interested in the work you're doing, and I appreciate your insights about the future and the innovation that you're doing. So thank you so much.
Really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Awesome. And everybody, this is the Top of Mind podcast. Thanks for joining us today. Subscribe, do all the things. Go to altosresearch.com to connect on the data, to find more episodes of the Top of Mind podcast. All right, everybody, we'll see you soon.
Thanks for listening to Top of Mind. See you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.